Beware the moon and stick to the roads. That is the tagline of today's video. Hello everybody and welcome to the first episode of Movie Recap, a series where I go back and talk about, older movies, give a little recap similar to my retro recap series that I've been doing, except I'm going to go in a little more detail about the story, the filming history, the filming locations, fun facts, my favorite moments. I thought I'd start with some horror movies, and today's movie is a film that I have a very strong love-hate relationship with ever since I was a little kid, and that is An American Werewolf in London. Now, why do I have a love-hate relationship? Well, I will explain that later in the video. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the story of this movie. Okay, so as you may have guessed, the movie is about an American who somehow becomes a werewolf, and he happens to be in Europe, London. So the movie starts off with two Americans, Jack and David. They're hitchhiking through the moors, through Yorkshire in the backcountry of Europe, and they're on this truck, and they're just trying to get from point A to point B. Well, when it stops, the driver tells them, stick to the road and stay out of the moors. And they're like, okay, whatever. And so they start walking down the road, and it eventually starts to get a little dark and starts getting colder, and they're like, hey, we need to get out. We need to get into somewhere where it's warm. So they come across this pub known as the Slaughtered Lamb. Now, me seeing the logo for this, you would think, hey, something's up with this. This sign is a wolf, a severed wolf head on a pike. So something is going on here, and we just don't know what. They go into the pub. Everybody in there is just, not really welcoming them. They're like, basically nobody's saying anything. They're just kind of staring at them like, who are these guys? They're minding their own business, basically. Guys playing darts, playing chess, just minding their own business. They sit down. The bar owner comes over to them, gives them a couple drinks, and she walks away. But they start noticing these things on the wall. Like there's some candles, a cross, a pentagram on one wall, and Jack's like, hey, David, you see all this stuff? And they're just kind of trying to figure out what all of this is. And Jack says, I think that's the mark of the wolf, or the mark of the beast, like in the Wolfman. And David says, oh, you're full of it. It's nothing. They're probably just a fan of Texas or the Alamo. So when the lady comes back, he says, remember the Alamo? And she goes, what? And David says, oh, he's just joking with you, whatever. She goes, I remember the Alamo, that movie. And they all start talking about it and having a good old laugh, cracking jokes, this and that. And I guess Jack felt comfortable enough to ask them what the cross on the wall was for, or what that sign on the wall was for. And that's when they all just get dead quiet. And they're like, basically thinking, you're not supposed to ask about that. We don't talk about that. So David realizes they've overstayed their welcome, and he goes, okay, well, we should probably leave. And so they end up leaving. But before they leave, one of the guys tells them, stick to the roads and beware the moon. Well, they're like, okay, cool. We'll do that. They leave, and they're walking down a little bit. And the lady, the bar patron says, you shouldn't have let them leave. And one of the guys is like, nobody wanted them here. We didn't ask for them to come here. And so it pans back to David and Jack, and they're walking down the road. It starts raining. Well, they're like, oh crap, it's raining. And they veer off the road, forgetting completely what they told them. Goes back to the bar, and she's looking up at the ceiling like, maybe the rain will keep them safe. Well, 2 seconds later, you hear a howl. And she's like, did you guys hear that? And one guy says, no, I didn't hear anything. And another guy's like, I didn't hear anything either. And she goes, you have to go get them. You have to bring them back here. And they're all scared to death. They're like, we don't want to go out there and find out what that is. So it goes back to David and Jack, and they hear the howl too. And Jack's like, hey, did you hear that? And David's like, yeah, I heard it. And he goes, what was it? He goes, I don't want to find out. Let's get out of here. So they start running. They hear the howl again. And Jack's like, what is that? And so they're just trying to get out of the area that they're in. They realize they're lost because Jack looks up and he sees the moon, and he goes, oh, it's a full moon. And they go, beware the moon and stick to the roads. And they look down, and they're both like, oh crap. So they hear the growling, and it's circling them, and they're like, we need to get out of here. David says, I vote we go back to the slaughtered lamb. And he goes, good idea. And so they're running, and they still realize they're lost, and they don't know where they're going. And David's like, where are we going, Jack? And he says, I don't know. I'll tell you when we get there. Well, David ends up tripping and falling. And they think, oh, okay, whatever. Ha ha ha. Funny. I fell. And Jack's like, you gave me a heart attack. I thought you got attacked or something. And David's like, you gonna help me up? Well, as Jack's leaning down to help David up, he gets attacked by something. We don't know what it is. I mean, we know what it is, but they themselves do not know what it is. And Jack's just getting ripped to shreds, torn apart, mauled to death, basically. And David does the same thing I would do, hightail it out of there, running as far away as he possibly can. Well, you hear Jack, calling for David, saying, help, 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 help. I'm, basically getting killed here. Help me. And then it cuts to David, and he realizes, I need to help Jack. Well, at this point, Jack's already dead. Like, he's gone. David runs all the way back, sees Jack there, laying there, just shredded to pieces, basically. And he realizes he's gone. It's too late. And then about a second later, the monster comes back and attacks David, and he gets clawed like right here, gets clawed across the face. He's basically thinking, I'm dead. I'm as good as dead. I'm going to die here. Then you hear a gunshot, and it's the bar patrons. They went out and found them, and they shoot the wolf, which we now know is a wolf. And wolf dies, or whatever, and then you just see David looking up like, holy crap, I just got saved by, I don't know what, somebody saved me. And he looks over. When he looks over, he just sees a guy there with gunshots. And he's just like, what was that? What happened? So the patrons are looking down at him like, whatever, he's going to die from his injuries anyways. Because they knew what was going on. And they're like, he's just going to die from his injuries. So, whatever. And then I believe it was the next day or a few days later, he wakes up in the hospital. They're talking to him. They're, explaining to him, he's in the hospital. He's trying to ask where Jack is. And like, Jack is he's dead. I'm sorry. He's gone. And the doctor's like, well, can you tell me about the man who attacked you? And David's like, it wasn't a man. It was a wolf. And they said, or a wolf or a rabid dog. And they kept pushing the subject that it was a crazed lunatic that escaped from the mental hospital. And he's like, no, it was a wolf. So, flash forward a little bit, and he starts having nightmares of, becoming a werewolf or becoming something. He's not quite sure what. And it's just him running through the forest, and he sees himself in a bed, a hospital bed, and then he sees himself transform, and he wakes up, and he's just like, what is going on? What is that? And another dream he had was he's at home back in New York, and somebody comes to the door, and it's just these soldiers who look like they're World War II soldiers, and they're all werewolves, and they're just like shooting his family and all that, and setting the house on fire. And he wakes up again, and they're just trying to ask him, hey, what's wrong? He goes, I'm having these dreams. I've never had these nightmares. I've had nightmares before, but they've never felt so real. And so they bring him breakfast, and as they're leaving, he's getting ready to eat his breakfast. He looks up, he sees Jack standing there. Jack's all slashed to hell, cut up, ripped up, all that. And David thinks he's dreaming still. He's like, am I awake or am I dreaming? And Jack's like, I know I don't look the best, but I have to warn you. And he goes, warn me about what? And he says, we were attacked by a werewolf, and the only way to stop it is to basically kill yourself. You need to end the werewolf's bloodline. Otherwise, I'm cursed to walk the earth as an undead being. And David's just like, get out of here. You're full of crap. And he starts calling for the nurse. They come in, and he says, I just saw Jack. And they go, your friend? He goes, yeah, I just saw him here. And they're like, maybe it was the medicine. And he's like, no, I saw him. And Jack was basically just warning him, you're going to transform in the next the next full moon, which is a couple days from this point. So the doctor thinks, okay, I'm going to go to the slaughtered lamb, check up on their story, see what's going on, what happened. He goes to the slaughtered lamb, and they're all keeping to themselves, just like they were at the beginning of the movie, not really saying anything, ignoring the fact that what they saw happened. And they're just like, no, nothing happened. It was nothing, don't worry about it. Well, he doesn't get any answers. He leaves, and he sees one guy standing there from the pub, the guy who told them beware the moon and stick to the roads. And he starts talking to the guy, and the guy says, that boy's in danger. And he says, not the one who died. He goes, the one who lived, he's in danger. And he's trying to explain to him that he's a werewolf. He needs to be killed to end the bloodline. And somebody else comes out and says, that's enough. You need to hush. You need to be quiet right now. Stop telling them everything. We don't need them knowing our business. And so he leaves, and the doctor starts to realize maybe David is some kind of monster. And at this point, David is already checked out of the hospital. He's living with Alex in her flat. The nurse who was taking care of him, I'm sorry. Her name is Alex. And I guess she didn't tell the doctor. And the doctor says, has Miss Price seen David since he left the hospital? And she basically says yes. And he goes, we need to talk. And he explains to her what he was told at the slaughtered lamb. Well, she's thinking about it, and she's just kind of like, whatever. And they're back at her apartment, her flat. David wakes up to go, take care of nature and use the restroom and everything. And he sees Jack in the mirror. He freaks out. And Jack, at this point, is looking more zombified than anything. He's got like a greenish color to him. He's basically rotting because he's underground, buried underground, but he's rotting. And he's, again, telling David, look, you need to do something about this, because if you don't, you're going to hurt people. You're going to transform on the next full moon, which at this point is the next day. And David's just like, am I really going to turn into a monster? And then Alex wakes up, comes to talk to David, and she goes, I heard voices, and he goes, I saw Jack again. And she goes, you did here? And he goes, yeah. He says, I'm gonna turn into a monster. They have a good laugh, whatever. The next day, she goes to work, and he stays back at the apartment, and it's just cutting in and out of him being at the apartment, her at the hospital, and he's wandering around the house, the flat, just thinking, okay, tonight's the night. This is it. I'm gonna either turn into something or I'm not. And after a bit, it shows Alex in the hospital. She's talking to this little kid, just filler time or whatever. The camera pans up to the window, and you see the full moon, and it cuts back to David, and he's just sitting there in the chair reading the book, and he starts freaking out, almost like he's having a headache or whatever, and he starts ripping all his clothes off because he's burning up. This is part of the transformation. Starts burning up, and basically he's transforming. He's looking at himself. He's looking at his hand, turning into like this, but longer. And he's just like, oh my God, I am, something is happening. I am turning into this monster that Jack warned me about. And the transformation scene was fairly long, about 2 minutes. And he's just, you see all these different angles of him transforming. And he's basically telling Jack, who isn't even there, he's like, Jack, I'm sorry. I didn't believe you. And by the end of it, he's full-blown werewolf. He still looks a little bit humanish. You don't see the full werewolf until later in the movie, but you hear the howl after he's finally turned, and he goes on his killing spree. Basically, you see this couple who is going to visit a friend for dinner, and they want to go around the back way. Well, that causes them to get attacked by David. He mauls them. You don't see the actual mauling like you did earlier with Jack, but he kills them. And then I forget which one happens first or second or third, but then you see it cuts to some homeless people, and they hear a growl. And they're just like, what was that? And so one of them sees what it is, and he's just like, oh my god. And then you see the wolf head jump at the camera, but you don't see them get mauled. Then it cuts to a subway, and this guy is getting off the subway, and he's like, you know, whatever, it's been a day, I'm going home, let me stop and get a snack from the machine or whatever. And he hears a growling in the tunnel. He's like, what was that? He's like, is somebody there? And he's like, whatever, if this is a joke, I'm gonna report it. You'll be reported. And he starts walking on his merry way, and he starts hearing the growling getting closer. Well, he turns around, and you don't see it, but he sees it. And he's just like, oh my god, I need to, oh my god. And he just runs, and he's running, trying to get out of there as fast as possible. And same thing I'd be doing, running, if I saw something like that. And so he ends up tripping on an escalator going upstairs. And why he didn't get back up and just run, I don't know. But he just sat. I guess he was in shock, and he's just looking. And it's a bird's eye view, and you see him going up the escalator, and then you see the wolf come into frame just for like a split second, like a hair. And then the camera cuts back to him, and it's moving closer to him. When it finally gets to him, it cuts to a zoo, and you see, I think, a lion roaring, and then you see a bunch of wolves in a cage. Well, Dave is in the cage too, because they think it's just an escaped wolf from the zoo, and they didn't realize it's actually a werewolf. So he's going to turn back into a man once the full moon goes down. And so he's like, how did I get here? Because he doesn't remember transforming. He gets out of there. He steals a lady's coat to cover up, because he's basically naked, to cover up and go back to the apartment. Gets to change the clothes and everything. He goes call home, asking what's going on, or asking if everybody's okay, because I think he knows that he's not going home at this point. So at this point he's thinking about it. He's like, I need to figure out how I'm going to end the bloodline. He's just trying anything to get himself killed, or arrested so he can be in a jail cell. He's just trying anything to basically end the bloodline. And so he runs away. He's running around, and then he I think Alex is with him, and he leaves her, and she doesn't know where he went. Well, he sees Jack across the street, and Jack's like, hey, come here. So he goes into a theater, questionable theater, and he goes, there's some people I want you to meet. And so he's introducing him to all his victims, the couple, the homeless people, and then the guy he killed on the subway. And what's funny about the guy on the subway is, like, we didn't think it would be best for you to see him because he's a fresh kill, and all of them are pretty not happy to see him. The guy's like, pleased to meet you. Can't say I'm happy to see you or happy to meet you, except for the couple. They seem generally like, okay with it, I guess. Just the way they say hello, and everybody else is like, screw you, man, you killed us. And so they're again all telling him, he says, this is what needs to happen for us to stop walking the earth as undead corpse. And so he's like, this is very flattering. I'm sorry about what happened to all of you, but I don't know what to say. And they're telling him all the different ways he can kill himself, like get a gun, hanging. And then Jack says if he hangs himself, if he does it wrong, he might just choke. And one of the homeless guys goes, good, let him choke. He goes, he's a friend of mine. And the guy's like, he's not a friend of mine. He killed me, basically. So, all that's going on. And then it cuts to the city. And you see another full moon. And then it cuts back to David. And he's like freaking out again because he's transforming again. And one of the guys in the theater comes up to him and he says, hey, basically looking at him like, you okay? And David's telling him, you need to get out of here. Please leave, run, get out of here. And I don't know why the guy didn't just leave. He just kind of sat there watching this happen. I guess just in awe, like, oh my God, what's going on? And so you hear a scream because it cuts forward to the front of the theater. You hear a scream. And the usher was like, what was that? And the ticket taker was like, I don't know. And he goes, I'll go find out. So he goes back there and he is trying to figure out what's going on. He can't see anything because the theater is just dark. and he gets attacked by the wolf. Well, it cuts to, like, I guess the doctor again, and then it goes back to the theater, and you hear the lady you see the lady screaming, and she's like, oh my god, there's a monster in there. And so the police have been called. They go in there to see what's going on. The cop goes in, shines his flashlight, he sees all these bodies, and he's like, what the hell is going on here? And then he sees the wolf, and this is like the full werewolf, full puppet, everything. And he sees the wolf look up, bloody face, everything. Does the same thing I would do. Oh crap, runs out of there, shuts the door behind him, and he's like, lock the door, there's a monster in there. And at this point, the wolf is just barging at the door, and they're like, we need to get this freaking door locked because there's a monster in there. And all these people are just standing around watching, like, what's going on? And the cops are like, get back, get out of here, go, stop, what are you doing? And I'm just like, why are these people standing here? And so I guess the chief of police is what it was, shows up, and he's like, hey, what's going on? And at this point, Wolf barges through the door, because it's like a wooden door, it's a wooden, shutter and everything, crashes through the door, bites the guy in the neck, his whole head falls off, rolls over a car hood. I'm kind of like, okay, he must have bit pretty hard. And at this point, the werewolf is just causing rampage, just running through Piccadilly Circus, causing all kinds of havoc, car wrecks, people getting run over, people getting hit, thrown through windows, just running around. And so the doctor and Alex show up, and at this point, David has been cornered into an alley, and Alex is like, let me go talk to him, let me try and see if I can get through to him. Basically, I wouldn't have done, I would have just been like, screw this. He goes on the hall, down the alleyway, because David's scared at this point, and I think his human side is scared, but his wolf side is still like, attack. And so Alex is talking to David, and she goes, they're gonna kill you, basically. And she's trying to get through to him. She's trying to see if he's still there. And then when she tells him, I love you, it cuts to the wolf's face, and you see his eyes just kind of like, he's just like, wait a minute. And then he lunges at her and gets shot. And I think part of the reason why he did that was so that he could end the wolf bloodline right there. And then you see her, she starts crying, and then it cuts back to David, and you see him just laying there. He's at the doctor, and police are running down the street. She's crying, and you see him just laying there because he's been shot. And then the movie just ends. But there was a sequel, and they don't really explain in this movie how that sequel ties into it. So I will talk about that a little bit later in the video. Okay, so with that being said, I want to go ahead and jump into the history and filming of this movie, because there's a few interesting facts that I wanted to share with you guys. A couple interesting things about the filming of this movie. John Landis, the director, wrote the script early in his film career, and then he just kind of shelved it for about 10 years until the success of Animal House and Blues Brothers, and then his movie Schlock, about an ape, which, kind of paved the way for a werewolf, gained a cult following. So he's like, one monster movie did well, so why don't I return to this one and see if this one does well. So he did that, and when they were filming the movie, they filmed it during February and March, during poor weather on purpose. They wanted the poor weather to be as real as possible in the movie. One cool thing was that the movie was the first one to film or allowed to film in Piccadilly Circus in 15 years. That was because John Landis showed a viewing of Blues Brothers and everybody loved it, so he hired 300 people. They allowed him, so he hired 300 people to be in this one scene, which is the end scene of the movie. Another interesting thing was that when the studio read the script, they said, hey, this is too funny to be a horror movie and too scary to be a comedy, so why don't we just make it a horror comedy? And that's why you get some little cracks and funny, lines of humor here and there. Some of them not intending to be funny, but, they make you laugh with the situation, trying to be funny in a serious moment, So pretty much that's the history and the filming. Let me go ahead and jump into the special effects and talk a little bit about that. The special effects were done by Rick Baker, who is known for a lot of horror movie makeup, special effects. He's done a lot of my favorite movies. They had him doing the special effects in this, and what's interesting about it was he was initially tied to this movie, and John Landis, I guess, was just taking too long to work on the movie or get the movie started, and so Rick Baker said, all right, I'm going to work on The Howling instead, which came out a year prior to American Werewolf. And so he's working on this, and John Landis calls him up and says, okay, hey, I'm ready to do the movie. Basically stop what you're doing there and come over here. So he went and did the effects, and the final wolf was based on his German Shepherd, which was a whitish gray German Shepherd. And he actually won an award for this movie, from the transformation scene to the wolf, everything. And it was like the first of its kind to win an award. And it was also the first movie of its kind to do a transformation scene like this, because before that, with werewolf movies or Wolfman movies, all you saw was, the guy sitting in a chair, and then it just kind of faded in and out of scenes, or cross-faded in between scenes to make it look like he was transforming. This one was straight up practical effects, the mouths, the wolf's snout getting longer. It was amazing, but it also scared the living hell out of me when I saw this scene happening, which again, I'll talk about, later in the video. But it's just amazing, these special effects, because it paved the way for other movies to do similar transformation scenes. And even some of his work was in The Howling. The transformation scene looked a lot similar to this one, so you can see where both movies use the same kind of effect. But after that, they just started using it until the 90s, 2000s, they started going more CGI and everything, which to me doesn't hold a candle to the 80s werewolf transformations. I think the closest thing that we got was probably Hemlock Grove. Was one of the coolest transformation scenes that I've seen since American Werewolf and Silver Bullet. But that's some of the things I loved about the special effects. With that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and give you guys some fun trivia about the movie that I didn't even know about. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Okay, so here's some interesting facts that I didn't know. The studio originally wanted John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd to play the main characters in the movie. That to me would not have worked, because those two guys are more funny than anything. Especially coming from SNL, they were just funny guys. And a movie like this, where it's horror, I don't think their comedy would have worked as well. Whereas you got the two actors that they did get in the movie had that like dry humor, so they weren't trying to be funny. They were just funny. Like, they would say stuff that would make you laugh. Another interesting fact is that the movie inspired Michael Jackson's Thriller, but the music video. So he came to John Landis and said, I want you to do a music video for me. I'm a big fan of your movie, but I want you to turn me into a monster. So John Landis thought, why not a werewolf? Our movie did well. People love it. Why not a werewolf? So he got everybody who worked on the movie to come in and do this music video. So Rick Baker did all the special effects and makeup for the werewolf segment, the zombie segment, all of that. And what's cool about it is it starts off like a movie, and it goes in a music video, and then it ends like a movie. So I thought that was kind of cool how they did that. But the werewolf effect looked more like a cat mixed with a dog. So I was like, now I watch it, I'm like, why was I scared of that? There is a sequel that was in the works to, follow up this movie. So, and that's not the one I mentioned earlier, but they were talking about filming a movie or making a sequel, and it would have followed the girl that Jack and David were talking about at the beginning of the film. Debbie something, I think was her name. And she would have gone back to London to find out, what happened to Jack, what happened to David, why they were killed, and all that. And you would have found out that Alex was the original werewolf that attacked them. And it honestly makes no sense to me, but whatever works. It sounds cool. I would have liked to have seen something like that. However, we did get a sequel called An American Werewolf in Paris. It has a little bit to do with the original movie, but at the time of Werewolf in London, they weren't even talking about making a sequel. So yes, it has some ties to it, but not a whole lot, if you ask me. And I don't want to get too much into detail on that, because I may recap that movie as well sometime down the road. The funny trivia fact that I found out was that some moviegoers didn't know what kind of movie they were watching. They went into it thinking it was just another Animal House type movie. I mean, the title says An American Werewolf in London, so you would think it's about a werewolf. And I don't even remember if the original posters had the picture of the werewolf. I think they just had the moon and Jack and David looking up at the moon. So reports said that people were running out of the theater screaming, crying, getting as far away from the theater as possible. And I want to say it's probably due to that scene with Jack and David getting attacked, because that's one of the first scary scenes you see, is that scene. So that might have been what it was. Speaking of that attack scene, when they were filming it, I read somewhere that Griffin Dunn, the actor who played Jack, had broken the prop, the wolf prop they had. So it was a wolf head on a stick, similar to the Slaughtered Lamb poster, and Rick Baker would just, jab at it and turn the head. So when you see the wolf attack, you see the head spin. That's him spinning the stick. And apparently the actor broke it, and so they had to fix it. And Rick Baker was so pissed about that in the next take, the one that's actually in the movie, he's jabbing him even harder with that head on a stick, because he's so mad about the fact that his prop got broken. I mean, I would have been too. I would have been mad too. And apparently years later, I mean, it might have not been Griffin Dunn, but somebody broke the prop, and then years later, they got him back in the movie Wolfman. So you see Rick Baker in that movie, and he gets jabbed across the screen, and somehow that had something to do with payback for breaking the stick and then jabbing him even harder. So something along those lines. Don't really quote me on that, because I don't remember the story word for word how it happened, but I remember the prop being broken and him getting mad about that and just jabbing even harder. But it had something to, like, the Wolfman movie did have something to do with it years and years and years later. I do know that the two actors did keep the puffer jackets they had, but I think that the actor to play David, who's also named David in real life, he might have given his to like a auction house or something, because I saw somebody else has it now too, but don't quote me on that either, because I'm not entirely sure on that. But that's pretty much all the fun facts that I have. I already mentioned the one about the final wolf being based on Rick Baker's dog. So let's go ahead and get into my favorite moments / the moments that scared me the most as a kid. So I have to do full screen for this one, because I want y'all to see my reactions and everything. My favorite moments in this movie are probably the pub scene when they first go into the Slaughtered Lamb, and everybody's just kind of looking at them like, who the hell are you? Who asked you to come here? And it's just funny because everybody just stops dead. Like, we don't want you guys here. But, the bar owner was welcoming them, because it was cold out. So I get it. The transformation scene absolutely scared the living hell out of me as a kid. I remember being about 3 years old, and my parents were watching this movie in the living room of our house, and I was just going in to see what they were watching, because I wanted to go watch TV or whatever. And it happened to be on the scene with him transforming into the werewolf. I remember it happening a lot quicker than it did when I was a kid, because all I saw was the hair growing, the claw, the hand growing, the claws coming out, the fangs. Scared me half to death. I ran out of the room, down the hall, hid behind a dresser, and I remember my mom had to come find me, like telling me it was okay, and I was like, nothing is okay about that. So that scene is probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie, also one of my most hated scenes in the movie, because it made me not want to watch werewolf movies for a good 10 years. I stopped watching them until I watched Silver Bullet one day in the mid-90s, and I was like, this isn't really that bad. And then I watched another movie called Project Metal Beast, and that's a really crappy werewolf movie, but it's low budget fun. And so those two movies changed my mind. You know, I actually watched I did watch American Werewolf in London one day on Comedy Central, and I said to myself, let me face my fears and watch this movie. And I got over it. I was fine. Nothing. It was totally fine. Nothing. It didn't scare me that much after that. But I do get, if I'm watching this movie late at night by myself, yes, I will get a little tense, because if my dog starts barking at something, I'm like, oh, what was that? The subway scene is another favorite of mine, because it reminded me of Jaws the Revenge. I know. Jaws the Revenge is not the best movie to compare it to, but at the opening scene, this is the only scene I remember from that movie, was the opening scene, and they're going through this like tunnel in the ocean, and the werewolf scene in the subway of this movie looked a lot like that too, when he's chasing the guy. And what's cool about it is you don't see the werewolf. You don't see him at all. Yes, you see him a little bit in that bird's eye view, but other than that, you don't see him. When he's running, when the guy's running around the corner, I'm expecting to see a werewolf come after him and chase him, but you don't see anything. And so I just like the effect of it, the feel of it, the whole, hey, I don't see anything, but this guy's running from something. And they did, if you haven't watched the Creepshow TV show on Shudder, they did do an episode that was covering every bit, like every famous werewolf movie in one episode, and it was pretty cool. And they did something like that, and something like the dream sequence as well was done in that episode. Another cool scene that I liked was the effect of Jack decaying throughout the movie. So he starts off, claw mark across his face, and you see like his blood just pouring, not really pouring out of him, but you see him bloodied up and everything, and you can kind of see in here too, which is a little gross at times. But then you see him start decaying more, and you see a close-up of his hand, and it's like just chunks of his hand are missing, and he's got like that greenish color, and it's just like, oh man, this guy's going to hell. And then by the end of the movie, he's straight up skeletal. It's just a puppet talking with his voiceover when he's in the theater. And I want to say they might have had, and it's funny because you see him in that scene when he's waving Jack over like, hey, come here. He's normal. He's in the, zombified state. But then when you see him in the theater, he's like decayed between then and the 2 seconds after. And he's just straight up skeleton. So I want to say maybe they put a mask on him or something, because the actor's still reaching up to scratch his nose and everything. And it's a cool effect, and you see all the other people in that scene too who are basically going through the same thing, claw marks, bite marks, you name it. And the whole theater scene itself was great. I love that scene, simply because you see him transforming again, and all the people in there are like, what's going on? Me, I would have been like, as soon as I saw the nails getting longer, I'd have been like, bye, I'm out. And then the scene with Piccadilly Circus was one of my favorite scenes. Just the fact of seeing that werewolf run around the streets and just causing so much crap, so much havoc and chaos and all that. Just, it's one of those scenes where you're like, all this stuff happening at once. And I'm loving every minute of it. I love movies that do that, where they have just a bunch of things happening at once. And so those are my favorite scenes that scared me the most. I do recommend this movie to anybody who has not seen it. Definitely check it out. especially if you're a fan of monster movies. It's one of the best ones out there. I actually, as I showed you earlier in the movie, this is my special edition Blu-ray that I got from Arrow Video last year. It's limited, so this one is not available anymore in that box. But definitely check the movie out. It's available everywhere. You can get it on Google, YouTube. Well, it's the same thing. Amazon. You can get it anywhere. So definitely check out the movie if you haven't already. With that being said, I just wanted to let you guys know that I do stream on Twitch every Tuesday and Thursday. Right now my schedule's kind of off a little bit with everything going on, so just Tuesdays and Thursdays is when it happens. Definitely check out that link below. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and thumbs up to be notified, or ring that bell to be notified of when videos go live. If you are a fan of this movie or monster movies in general, please let me know down below what you thought. I'd love to talk about this movie. If you've been to the Halloween Horror Nights maze, let's talk about that too, because that's another thing I can do in a video. I love that maze. Awesome maze. Scared the crap out of me, but it was awesome. With that being said, thank you guys for watching. And as always, I will see y'all in the next episode. Y'all take it easy.